I call on Neil Hamilton to move amendments 5 and 6 tabled in his name.
And I beg to move the amendment standing in my name. Well, I agree with Darren Millar that this doesn't necessarily mean that devolution could have succeeded, and that it's because we've had a Labour government propped up by Plaid Cymru for the entire life of this Assembly in one shape or form, either in coalition with it or at the beginning of this Assembly. Of course, they were instrumental in voting for the Labour government to be put back into office under the former First Minister. So Plaid Cymru bear equal responsibility for the failures of the Labour government. Di Lloyd said in his speech that we should respect the result of the 2011 referendum, which raises a horse laugh in those who didn't want to respect the result of the referendum in 2016 and wanted to reverse the decision of the British and Welsh people before it had even been implemented. It took us 41 years from 1975 to get a new EU referendum. It's been a generation since the first referendum to establish an assembly in Wales, and I think after 25 years of failure, unrelieved failure by a permanent Labour government, it is time to allow the Welsh people to have their say once more. I wouldn't personally be against having a referendum on independence as part and parcel of that. I see no reason why that should not be put to the Welsh people as well. And so I hope that Plaid Cymru will support me in a demand for a referendum on the various options which the Welsh people can decide between. There's no doubt that there's been considerable disaffection growing in Wales from both ends of the spectrum here in recent years. The latest YouGov poll in January had in its results that 21% of those who responded favour independence, but 24% want to abolish this place. That's 46%, one way or another, who express an extreme form of dissatisfaction with the performance of the Assembly. Until Gareth Bennett started to raise this issue a little time ago, there was nobody in this Assembly who was giving voice to that very substantial minority that now wants to see this place abolished. I'm pleased to see the Brexit Party following in our slipstream, but I'm not sure that the proprietor of the Brexit Party actually knows about the policy change that has been adopted. Maybe we'll find out about that later. There are arguments for devolution, of course. In fact, I've made them myself in this Assembly. Earlier on, I have seen what devolution could have done in other parts of the world. And if we had had a government that was prepared to put forward policies that could start to solve some of the problems which have been pointed out in this debate so far, then I could support it.
That's a giving way, Neil, and you've made a very interesting contribution. I think it's a thought-provoking debate. Would you agree that, as Darren Millar said earlier, that we have to distinguish between devolution and between the Welsh Government? And too often people don't do that. For instance, if you were First Minister yourself, maybe you'd look a little bit more sympathetically on devolution.
Well, that's an interesting thought. But that is the problem. That is the problem, that in Wales we have lived under a permanent one-party state. And it's because I see this as an incurable flaw in the system that I have reluctantly come to the conclusion that not only has devolution failed, but it will always fail because the political culture is such that anybody who is right of centre is never going to have a government that he or she will be happy with. And that, I think, is the flaw with the Conservative amendment as well. All I'm saying is that the democratic institutions by which Wales is governed actually exclude the views of a very substantial proportion of the population permanently, and that is a big flaw in the system. When I was at Westminster, I saw the opposite side of this coin, which gave rise to the Scottish Parliament. It's because the Scottish people were permanently represented at Westminster by a party of which they didn't approve. We couldn't say that here in Wales, at least to the same extent. The catalogue of failures of the Welsh Government are legion. We are languishing at the bottom of the income tables in the United Kingdom by a very long margin indeed. We have about 75% of the average income here in Wales, the average UK income here in Wales. There are all sorts of problems of poverty in Wales which have not been addressed by Welsh Labour government. Fuel poverty, for example, which has been made even worse by their policy of driving up energy prices, and so many other things as well, which I've now not got time, unfortunately, to go into. But the big problem is it's the UK government that has got the money. The fiscal deficit that we have in Wales, which has been pointed out, is a very substantial proportion of our GDP, can only actually be met by money which comes from the English taxpayer. And therefore, if Wales is to have even a small chance of changing the deplorable state of the Welsh economy and living standards of the Welsh people, that it can only be done through the greater firepower which a UK government has.